Have you ever noticed how the kindest people are often the ones who get stepped on the most? How those who always say yes end up being the last to be respected? There is something deeply wrong with that. And today I'm going to reveal a truth that Socrates, one of the greatest philosophers in history, discovered more than 2,400 years ago. A truth so powerful it can completely transform the way you relate to the world. And pay close attention. The final revelation in this video is so impactful that it will make you rethink every interaction you've ever had in your life. Get ready, because what you're about to discover may be uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. Before we begin this transformative journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I promise that by the end of this video, you'll have practical tools in your hands that can change your life. Tools the great masters of Stoic philosophy used to earn respect, admiration, and unshakable inner peace. So don't miss a single second. Let's start by destroying a lie you've probably heard since childhood. You were told that being nice is the highest virtue, that you should always put others first, that saying no is selfish. But let me ask you something. Where has that excessive niceness gotten you? How many times have you sacrificed yourself for someone who never even acknowledged your effort? How many times have you swallowed your own needs just to please people who disappeared the moment you needed them? Socrates had a revolutionary view on this. He didn't believe in blind kindness. He believed in wisdom. And there is a massive difference between being nice and being wise. The nice person acts out of fear of rejection, out of a need for approval, out of insecurity disguised as generosity. The wise person acts out of conscious choice, authentic values, and inner strength that does not depend on external validation. Socrates said something that should be engraved in everyone's mind: know thyself. But what does that really mean? It means that before you go around trying to please everyone, you need to know who you are. You need to understand your limits, your values, your priorities. And here's the brutal truth no one tells you. When you don't know yourself, when you lack clarity about who you are, you become a leaf in the wind, pushed around by other people's desires. Think about it. When you say yes to everything, are you really being kind? Or are you just avoiding the discomfort of disappointing someone? When you erase yourself so others can shine, are you being humble? Or are you simply afraid to claim your own space? The truth is, kindness without intelligence is not virtue. It's weakness disguised as nobility. The Stoics, deeply influenced by Socratic teachings, understood this perfectly. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about how profound that is. He wasn't talking about controlling others or manipulating situations. He was talking about self-mastery, choosing your responses, and becoming the ruler of your own mind. Now let's talk about something that will make you rethink all your relationships. Socrates used a fascinating method called maieutic, the art of asking questions. He didn't hand out ready-made answers. He asked questions that led people to uncover their own contradictions, their own illusions. And do you know why that was so powerful? Because when you ask the right questions, you bring people face to face with their truth, not a truth imposed on them. Imagine applying this in your own life. Instead of always giving in, always agreeing, always saying yes, you start asking questions. When someone asks you for a favor you don't want to do, instead of automatically accepting, you ask yourself, why should I do this? How does this align with my priorities? Would this person do the same for me? These questions are not selfish. They are intelligent. They are the practice of self-knowledge that Socrates so passionately defended. And here's something that might shock you. Socrates was considered by many to be arrogant, annoying, even dangerous. Do you know why? Because he refused to be nice when the truth was at stake. He preferred to die, and in fact he did, rather than betray his principles. He was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods of the city. But what he really did was challenge hypocrisy and question the comfortable lies society accepted. You need to understand this. Being intelligent, in the Socratic sense, is not about being cruel. It's not about becoming cold or manipulative. It's about having the courage to live according to your values, even when it means disappointing people. It's about having the strength to set clear boundaries, even when it creates temporary discomfort. It's about choosing self-respect over the approval of others. The Stoics took this even further. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, taught, "It's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about those events." Think about the power of that. When someone treats you poorly, ignores you, or devalues you, the problem isn't their behavior. The problem is the meaning you assign to it. If you believe you need their approval to have worth, you suffer. If you know who you are, regardless of what they think, you remain whole. And that's the real difference between being nice and being intelligent. The nice person seeks external validation. They need others to like them, approve of their choices, recognize their sacrifices. The intelligent, the wise, find validation internally. They know what is right for them, act accordingly, and don't need applause to confirm their value. Let's go deeper. Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living. What did he mean by that? He meant that living on autopilot, reacting to others, being pushed around by external expectations, is not truly living. It's merely existing. Truly living means constantly examining your choices, questioning your motivations, and aligning your actions with your deepest values. How many times have you done something just because it was expected of you? How many times have you silenced your own voice to avoid conflict? How many times have you betrayed yourself just to keep the peace? Every time you do that, you are living an unexamined life. You are being nice, not wise. And here's another powerful truth Socrates left us. I know that I know nothing. This phrase is often misunderstood. People think he was being modest or self-deprecating. But what Socrates really meant was that he was aware of the limits of his knowledge, and that awareness made him wiser than those who believed they knew everything. He questioned everything, including himself. Now apply that to your kindness. Do you really know why you're being nice? Is it because you genuinely want to help, or because you're afraid of rejection? Is it because you respect the other person, or because you don't respect yourself enough to say no? This brutal honesty with yourself is the first step towards stopping being nice and starting to be intelligent. The Stoics had a concept called amor fati, which means love of fate, accepting what happens, not with passive resignation, but with active acceptance. Understanding that not everything is under your control, but your response always is, and choosing to respond with wisdom, not with a desperate kindness that craves approval. Let's now dive into something that exposes the root of this entire problem. Why did you become so nice? It wasn't by accident. From a young age, you were conditioned to believe that your safety depended on pleasing others. Your parents praised you when you obeyed and punished you when you questioned. At school, teachers favored the quiet, compliant students, the ones who didn't cause trouble. At work, you learned that disagreeing with your boss could cost you your career. And in relationships, you discovered that expressing your real needs could push people away. So you developed a survival strategy, being nice, smiling when you're uncomfortable, agreeing when you disagree, saying "I'm fine" when everything inside you is falling apart. And do you know what happened? You became invisible. You became predictable. You became disposable. Because people don't respect someone who doesn't respect themselves. And when you constantly erase yourself, you're shouting to the world that you don't value who you are. Socrates understood this in a way few people ever do. He knew that the real danger isn't being hated by some. It's being unknown to yourself. He chose to face death rather than live a lie. And before you think that sounds extreme, consider this. How many small deaths do you die every single day when you betray yourself? Every time you say yes when you want to say no, a part of you dies. Every time you swallow your words to avoid conflict, You kill a piece of your authenticity. The Stoics had a powerful practice called premeditatio malorum, which means the meditation on future evils. They imagined the worst-case scenario, not to torment themselves, but to prepare, to remove fear. Because once you've already faced the worst in your mind, you act with freedom. You're no longer a hostage to fear. Apply this to your excessive niceness. What's the worst that can happen if you say no? Someone might get upset. They might even walk away. So what? If someone only stays in your life as long as you erase yourself, do they really deserve to be there? If a relationship only works when you're constantly sacrificing yourself, that relationship isn't a connection. It's a prison. Now let me tell you something that changes everything. Socrates had followers, people who learned from him, but he never asked them to follow him. He never begged for attention, never flattered the powerful, never watered down his message to make it more acceptable. And what happened? He attracted the brightest minds of ancient Greece. Plato, one of the greatest philosophers in history, was his student. Why? Because authenticity attracts quality, strength attracts respect. When you stop being nice and start being authentic, something almost magical happens. The wrong people fall away, and the right people move closer. You stop collecting shallow acquaintances and start building deep connections. You stop being used and start being valued. But this requires courage. It requires being willing to lose people you've already lost a long time ago, because they never truly knew you. The Stoics spoke about a concept called oikeiosis, the process of coming into ownership of yourself. It means recognizing that you belong to yourself before you belong to anyone else or any group. It's understanding that your first responsibility is to yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a way rooted in integrity. How can you offer something genuine to others if you're empty inside? How can you help someone find their way if you yourself are lost? Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth, but what he really did was teach people to think for themselves, to question authority, to seek truth, not comfort, and that was dangerous to those who benefited from other people's ignorance. In the same way, when you stop being nice, when you start setting boundaries, when you claim your worth, you will upset people, especially those who were comfortable using you. And here's a brutal truth you need to hear. Some people won't like your transformation. That friend who always called to vent but was never there when you needed support will call you selfish when you're no longer available 24/7. That family member who constantly asked for favors but never gave back will call you cold when you start saying no. That partner who was used to making all the decisions will accuse you of changing when you begin to express your opinions. And you know what? That's okay. Let them talk. Let them judge, because the opinion of someone who doesn't respect you should carry no weight in your life. Socrates was judged by all of Athens and sentenced to death. He could have escaped. His friends offered to help him, but he chose to face the consequences of his convictions, because for him, living without integrity was worse than dying. Now, you don't need to be a martyr to live with integrity, but you do need to be willing to lose the approval of some people in order to gain respect for yourself. And when you have that self-respect, when you live aligned with your values, something extraordinary happens. You become magnetic. Not in the shallow way of someone trying to please everyone, but in the deep way of someone who is grounded in who they are. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who rose from slavery to mastery, taught something revolutionary. If you want to make progress, give up thoughts like these. If I neglect my affairs, I won't have enough to eat. Or, if I don't punish my servant, he'll become bad. For it is better to die of hunger, free from grief and fear, than to live in abundance with turmoil. Let that sink in. He's saying it's better to face practical consequences than to live enslaved by fear and the need to control others. How many times have you stayed in toxic situations because you were afraid of what would happen if you left? How many times have you controlled, manipulated, or erased yourself just to avoid a discomfort that, in the end, would have been far smaller than the suffering of staying? Being intelligent in the Socratic and Stoic sense means making hard choices now to have a better life later. It means saying no to invitations that drain your energy, even if that means being alone for a while. It means walking away from destructive relationships, even if that means facing loneliness temporarily. It means investing in yourself, your growth, your wisdom, even when no one applauds. Socrates spent his days in markets and public squares, talking to people, asking uncomfortable questions. He had no material wealth, but he possessed something far more valuable. He had himself. He didn't depend on anyone else to know who he was. And that inner independence is what I want you to cultivate. Think about all the times you changed your behavior to fit in, every time you hid your opinions to avoid conflict, every time you pretended to like something just to be accepted, each time you chose external approval over internal integrity. And what was the result? You built relationships based on a false version of yourself, and now you carry the burden of maintaining that lie. The Stoics practiced an exercise called the view from above, where you imagine your life seen from far away, from the universe itself. From that perspective, your problems shrink. The approval of someone who mistreats you, insignificant. The opinion of a group that excludes you, irrelevant. When you gain that perspective, you realize you've been spending precious energy chasing things that don't matter. If you're still watching and realizing how many times you've betrayed yourself out of fear, write in the comments, "I choose my integrity." Say it publicly, because when you put an intention into words, it becomes real. And if you're enjoying this content, hit the like button. It helps more people discover truths like these, truths that can genuinely change lives. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now we're entering the deepest and most unsettling territory of all. Let's talk about the real price you pay when you spend your life being too nice. And I'm not just talking about being used or disrespected. I'm talking about something far more serious, the complete loss of your identity. When you spend years shaping your behavior around other people's expectations, you don't just lose their respect, you lose something infinitely more valuable. You lose yourself. Socrates understood this at a profound level. He believed that every person carries within them a divine spark, a unique essence that must be discovered and honored. But how can you ever discover who you truly are if you're constantly adapting, transforming, reshaping yourself to fit what others want? You can't. You become a social chameleon, changing colors depending on the environment, and in the process, you forget what your original color was. And here's the cruel irony. While you're busy trying to please everyone, no one actually knows you, because what they see isn't you. It's a performance. A curated, filtered, carefully constructed version designed to gain approval. Deep down, you know this. That's why you feel so lonely even when you're surrounded by people. That's why you feel so misunderstood despite having so many acquaintances. No one is really seeing you. The Stoics called this living according to nature. And by nature, they didn't mean impulses or fleeting desires. They meant your deepest essence, your reason, your judgment, what makes you uniquely you. When you live against your nature, when you suppress who you truly are, you create an internal war, and that war slowly destroys you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You suffer more in imagination than in reality." Think about that. How many times have you avoided a difficult conversation because you imagined the worst possible outcome? How many times have you stayed silent because you anticipated a negative reaction that may never have happened? You're living in a world of ghosts, imaginary fears, and those ghosts are running your real life. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you have a friend who only reaches out when they need something, but disappears when you need them. You know the relationship is unbalanced. You feel the weight of it, but you say nothing because you imagine that if you confront them, they'll walk away and you'll lose the friendship. So you stay trapped in this unhealthy cycle, resentful, drained, but too afraid to act. But here's the truth. You already lost that friendship. It never truly existed. What exists is a convenient arrangement for them and a painful one for you. And as long as you cling to that illusion, you're occupying space in your life that could be filled by real, reciprocal, authentic connections. You're choosing the familiarity of suffering over the uncertainty of freedom. Socrates was famous for his irony. He pretended not to know things so people would reveal their own contradictions. And do you know why he did that? Because he understood something crucial. People don't change through lectures or direct advice. They change when they confront their own inconsistencies, when they realize that what they say and what they do are not aligned. So do this exercise now. Think about your values. What do you say matters to you? Respect? Honesty? Reciprocity? Now look at your actions. Are you living according to those values? Or are you constantly betraying them to maintain surface-level peace? If you value respect, why do you tolerate being disrespected? If you value honesty, why do you keep pretending you're fine when you're not? If you value reciprocity, why do you stay in relationships where you always give and never receive? These questions are uncomfortable, I know. But Socrates said that discomfort is the beginning of wisdom. When you feel uneasy about your own contradictions, you're standing at the threshold of transformation. You can retreat into the comfort of denial, or you can take the courageous step toward truth. The Stoics had a concept called ataraxia, meaning tranquility of the soul, but they weren't talking about a fake peace built on avoiding conflict. They meant a deep peace that comes from living in harmony with your principles. When you act in alignment with what you believe, when you set clear boundaries, when you honor yourself, you find that tranquility, not because your life is free of problems, but because you're free from internal dissonance. Now let's talk about something that's rarely said, the difference between kindness and foolish niceness. Kindness is helping someone because you genuinely want to and can, without self-betrayal and without expectations. Foolish niceness is when you erase yourself, hurt yourself, exhaust yourself trying to save people who don't want to be saved, please people who will never be satisfied, or earn love from those who don't have love to give. Socrates never tried to save anyone. He simply offered questions. He placed tools in people's hands, but it was their responsibility to use them. He understood a fundamental truth. You cannot want more for someone's life than they want for their own. And when you try, you're not helping. You're carrying a burden that isn't yours. How many times have you sacrificed yourself for someone who didn't even acknowledge your effort? How many times have you worn yourself down trying to change someone who didn't want to change? How many times have you put your life on hold to solve problems that were never yours? And what did you get in return? Exhaustion, resentment, that bitter feeling of being used. Epictetus said, "Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do, and your life will go well." This isn't passive resignation, it's intelligent acceptance. It's understanding that you don't control others, their choices or their reactions. You only control yourself. And when you try to control what you can't, you become a slave to endless frustration. Think about all the relationships where you tried to be perfect, tried to do everything right, tried to be flawless, and it was still never enough. Because the problem was never you. The problem was that you were trying to fill a void that wasn't yours to fill. You were taking responsibility for the happiness of someone who should have been responsible for their own. Being intelligent means understanding that you can't force people to value you, but you can value yourself. And when you do, when you set high standards for how you allow yourself to be treated, you naturally attract people who respect you and repel those who don't. Both outcomes are wins. Socrates was judged by a jury of 501 Athenian citizens. He could have made an emotional plea, begged for mercy, promised to change, but he didn't. He kept his dignity. He defended his principles. He told the truth, even knowing it might cost him his life. And it did. He was sentenced to death by a narrow margin. But here's what matters. Socrates didn't die defeated. He died whole. He died as himself, not as who others wanted him to be. And 2,400 years later, we still talk about him. We still study his ideas. We're still inspired by his courage. Meanwhile, those who condemned him are nothing more than footnotes in history. You don't have to die for your principles, but you do have to be willing to lose some people's approval, to live with integrity. And that symbolic death, the death of needing everyone's acceptance, is one many people are too afraid to face. It's easier to stay in the comfortable lie, the performative niceness, the fake life. But every day you live that way, you're dying on the inside. The Stoics practiced an exercise called memento mori. Remember that you will die, not to be morbid, but to gain clarity. When you remember that your time is limited, you stop wasting it on people who don't value you. You stop sacrificing yourself for empty approval. You start living for real. So let me ask you this. If today were your last day, would you be proud of how you lived? Or would you regret every time you betrayed yourself, every time you stayed silent, every time you chose acceptance over authenticity? That question should guide every decision you make, because in the end, the only approval that truly matters is your own. Now let's explore something that reveals why you remain trapped in this vicious cycle of being too nice, even though you know it's hurting you. And the answer may surprise you. You're afraid of your own strength. You're afraid of what would happen if you stopped holding yourself back, stopped shrinking, stopped constantly adapting. You've built an entire identity around being the safe, predictable person who never causes problems. And the idea of destroying that identity, even knowing it's false, terrifies you. Socrates faced that fear head-on. He knew that questioning Athenian society, challenging established beliefs, and exposing the hypocrisy of those in power could lead to terrible consequences, and it did. But he chose truth over safety. He chose authenticity over acceptance. And that wasn't recklessness, it was wisdom. Because he understood that a life lived in fear isn't really a life at all. It's just a prolonged existence. The Stoics made a clear distinction between what is under our control and what is not. Your opinions, judgments, choices, and reactions are under your control. Other people's opinions, reactions, and choices are not. And every time you try to control what you can't, you become a slave to anxiety. Every time you change who you are to manage how others see you, you're fighting a battle you can never win. Think about it. You can do everything right, be perfect in every way, and someone will still criticize you, judge you, or reject you. Because other people's reactions say far more about them than about you. They reflect their wounds, their insecurities, their unresolved trauma. And you cannot heal anyone's wounds by erasing yourself. All you create is a toxic dynamic where both of you stay stuck. Let's talk about manipulation. Yes, manipulation. Because excessive niceness is often a subtle form of it. You're nice not because you genuinely care, but because you want the other person to like you, approve of you, validate you. You give not out of authentic generosity, but because you expect something in return, even if it's just recognition. And when you don't get it, resentment builds. You feel used. But the truth is, you were using them too, using kindness as a bargaining chip. Socrates was brutally honest about this. He didn't pretend to have virtues he didn't possess. He didn't present himself as morally superior or flawless. He simply said, "I know that I know nothing." That radical humility was actually a form of strength, because he didn't need to maintain a facade. He wasn't afraid of being exposed, because he wasn't hiding anything. Now imagine living like that. Imagine not being afraid of people discovering who you really are, because you're already being that person. Imagine not having to remember the lies you told, the masks you created, the different versions of yourself you perform for different people. Imagine the freedom of being consistent, integrated, and authentic in every context. That is the promise of stopping being nice and starting to be intelligent. The Stoics spoke about apatheia, a word often mistranslated as apathy. But that's not what it means. Apatheia is freedom from destructive passions, emotions that control you. It's not being cold or detached. It's mastery over your reactions. It's refusing to let anger, fear, or the need for approval dictate your choices. It's being the commander of your own soul. When someone criticizes you unfairly, the instinctive reaction is to defend yourself, justify yourself, prove them wrong. But that gives them power. It allows them to control your emotions and your inner state. The Stoic response is different. Examine the criticism honestly. If there's truth in it, learn from it. If there isn't, discard it. But never allow it to disturb your inner peace. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the Roman emperor, the most powerful man in the world at the time, practiced this daily. In his private journal, Meditations, he constantly reminded himself not to be affected by others' opinions and not to be disturbed by external events. If a man with that much power still needed those reminders, what does that tell us about human nature? It tells us that the urge to seek external validation and be shaped by others' opinions is universal, but it can be overcome. Now let's talk about boundaries. That word scares a lot of people because it's misunderstood. Setting boundaries isn't being rude, aggressive, or insensitive. It's simply communicating clearly what you accept and what you don't. It's teaching people how to treat you, because here's the truth. People will treat you exactly the way you allow them to. Socrates had very clear boundaries. He refused bribes. He didn't soften his ideas to please those in power. He didn't lie to avoid conflict. And that came at a cost. He wasn't liked by everyone. Many found him irritating, arrogant, troublesome, but those who truly mattered, those who sought truth, respected him deeply. And here's something essential. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You need to be respected by those who matter, and most importantly, by yourself. When you set boundaries, some people will call you difficult. Let them. Because those are usually the people who benefited from you having none. They used your fear of rejection against you. The Stoics taught the concept of preferred indifference, things that are desirable but not essential to happiness. Wealth is preferable to poverty, but not essential. Health is preferable to illness, but not essential. Social approval is preferable to rejection, but not essential. True happiness, tranquility of the soul, comes from within, from virtue and wisdom, not from external circumstances. That means you can prefer to be liked, but you don't need it to be happy. You can prefer harmony in relationships, but not at the cost of your integrity. You can prefer to avoid conflict, but not when conflict is necessary to honor your values. This distinction changes everything. Think of all the times you sacrificed something essential for something merely preferable. You sacrificed authenticity for approval. You sacrificed inner peace for superficial harmony. You sacrificed growth for comfort. And the result? A life that looks good on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. Epictetus once told a student who constantly worried about others' opinions something devastating. If you are concerned with what others think of you, then you are their slave. Let that sink in. Every time you change your behavior because you fear judgment, you enslave yourself. You hand control of your life to people who probably aren't even thinking about you. Because here's an uncomfortable truth. People are far more concerned with themselves than with you. That awkward moment you replay in your mind 1,000 times, they probably don't even remember it. That mistake that still embarrasses you, to them, it was a minor detail. You're torturing yourself over judgments that mostly exist only in your head. Socrates knew he would be condemned. His friends knew it too. And yet, during his trial, he didn't try to manipulate the jury's emotions. He didn't give a dramatic speech begging for mercy. He spoke the truth as he saw it, and when he was sentenced, he accepted it calmly, because he lived according to his principles until the very end. You don't need to die for your principles, but you do need to be willing to live by them, and that means accepting consequences. Some people will leave, some will criticize you, some will say you've changed, that you've become arrogant, that you've lost your humility. And you know what you do? You let them talk, because those people were comfortable with a diminished version of you. They don't want your growth, they want your compliance. The Stoics practiced negative visualization, imagining the loss of what we value, not to torture ourselves, but to appreciate what we have and to prepare emotionally. When you imagine losing something, you realize two things. First, how much it truly matters. Second, and this is the liberating part, that you would survive the loss. Often the fear of loss is worse than the loss itself. So imagine losing the approval of everyone who currently validates you. Imagine being rejected, criticized, misunderstood. Really feel it. And then notice this. You would still be here. You would still be you. In fact, you would be more yourself than ever, because you would no longer be hiding behind masks. And in that realization lies your freedom. Now let's reveal something that can completely transform how you understand relationships and power. There is an invisible dynamic that governs all human interactions, and once you understand it, everything changes. The dynamic is this. People do not respect someone who is always available, always agreeing, always giving in. This isn't cruelty in human nature, it's simply reality. We value what is scarce, what has a cost, what must be earned. Socrates understood this deeply. He never chased disciples. He never begged for the attention of the powerful. He never softened his message to be more popular. And the result? He became the most influential thinker in Western history. People traveled from distant cities just to speak with him. Why? Because he possessed something that couldn't be bought or manipulated. Absolute authenticity. The Stoics called this dignitas, dignity. Not the shallow dignity of status or titles, but the deep dignity of someone who knows their own worth and doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. When you have this dignity, you don't need to chase people. The right ones come to you naturally, and the wrong ones drift away, which is just as valuable. Let me show you how this works in real life. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, you have a friend who always replies to your texts instantly, is always available whenever you need them, always agrees with you, always adjusts to your plans. How do you feel about that person? Probably grateful at first, but over time, you start to take that availability for granted. You know they'll always be there, so you don't have to make much effort. Now imagine another friend. This person has a full, busy life of their own. Sometimes they reply quickly, sometimes they take a while, sometimes they say yes to your plans, sometimes they already have commitments. When you share an opinion, they agree when they genuinely agree, and they disagree when they don't. How do you feel about this person? You value them more, you make more effort, you respect their time because you know it isn't unlimited. This is the uncomfortable truth. Scarcity creates value. And when you're always available, always agreeing, always giving in, you're unconsciously signaling that your time, your opinions, and your presence have little value. Not because that's true, but because that's the message you're sending. Socrates explored a fascinating idea through his questions, the difference between appearance and reality. People constantly confuse the two. Appearance is what seems to be. Reality is what actually is. You can appear kind while in reality being cowardly. You can appear generous while secretly trying to buy affection. You can appear humble while actually hiding. And here's the crucial point. Other people may be fooled by appearances, but you can't fool yourself. Deep down, you know when you're acting out of fear, neediness, or weakness, disguised as virtue. And that self-awareness erodes your self-respect, because you cannot truly respect yourself when you know you're living a lie. The Stoics practice something called prososche, watchful attention, constantly observing your own thoughts, motivations, and reactions, asking yourself, why am I doing this? Is it because I genuinely want to, or because I'm afraid of rejection? Is this aligned with my values, or am I trying to manipulate an outcome? This brutal honesty with yourself is painful, but it's the path to freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Think about the depth of that. When someone mistreats you and you respond in kind, you're not defending yourself, you're lowering yourself to their level. You're letting them define who you are. Real strength is maintaining your integrity regardless of how others behave. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse. It means responding with dignity. It means setting clear boundaries without anger, without drama, without the need to punish. It means calmly saying, "This is not acceptable to me," and then acting accordingly, whether that means distancing yourself, redefining the relationship, or cutting contact entirely. Socrates was insulted, mocked, and ridiculed by many in Athens. Plays were written to satirize him. Some people saw him as a threat. And how did he respond? With calmness. He kept asking questions. He kept seeking truth. He kept living according to his principles. Because he understood that other people's opinions of him did not define who he was. Now think about how many times you've been affected by unfair criticism. How many nights you've lost sleep over something someone said. How many times you changed your behavior just to avoid disapproval. And what did that bring you? More anxiety, more insecurity, more dependence on external validation. You handed your power to people who didn't even deserve your attention. The Stoics taught something revolutionary. Your emotions are the result of your judgments, not events themselves. It's not what happens to you that disturbs you, but how you interpret what happens. When someone criticizes you, the event is just sounds coming out of someone's mouth or words on a screen. The disturbance comes from the meaning you assign to those sounds or words. If you believe your happiness depends on that person's approval, the criticism destroys you. If you know your happiness comes from living in alignment with your values, the criticism is just information. You evaluate it. If there's truth in it, you learn. If there isn't, you discard it. That's it. But to reach that point, you have to do the inner work of building self-esteem that doesn't rely on external sources. And here's something no one tells you. Self-esteem isn't built through praise. It's built by keeping promises to yourself. Every time you set a boundary and maintain it, your self-esteem grows. Every time you act according to your values, even when it's hard, your self-esteem grows. Every time you honor yourself, your self-esteem grows. Socrates kept the most important promise anyone can make. The promise to live according to the truth as he understood it. That promise cost him his life, but it guaranteed his immortality, because more than 2,000 years later, we still speak of him with reverence. Meanwhile, those who betrayed him, who voted for his death to preserve their comfortable positions, are forgotten. You don't need to be remembered by history, but you do need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror with respect. And that only happens when you live with integrity, when your actions reflect your values, when you stop betraying yourself for crumbs of approval. Epictetus offered a powerful exercise. He said, "When you are about to do something, ask yourself, would I do this if everyone were watching? If the answer is no, don't do it. Because if you can't do something publicly with pride, then you're doing something that contradicts your values. And every contradiction like that erodes your soul. Now apply this to your excessive kindness. You sacrifice yourself, erase yourself, exhaust yourself, helping people who don't deserve it or don't value it. Would you do that if the whole world were watching? Or would you do it with shame, knowing you're being used, knowing you're betraying yourself? If it's the second, stop. You're not helping anyone. You're perpetuating a toxic dynamic. The Stoics talked about cosmopolitanism, the idea that we are all citizens of the world. But that didn't mean sacrificing yourself for anyone and everyone. It meant treating all people with basic respect and fairness, combined with wisdom, helping those who genuinely need and deserve help, not burning yourself out trying to save those who don't want to be saved. Socrates helped people by asking questions, not by giving answers. He placed responsibility back on them. He forced them to think, to question, to grow. He didn't take their problems on as his own. He offered tools, but it was up to them to use those tools. That's the difference between truly helping and creating dependence. When you always solve other people's problems, are always available and always give in, you're not being kind, you're being codependent. You're creating a dynamic where the other person doesn't need to grow, doesn't need to take responsibility, doesn't need to develop their own strength. And you burn out, grow resentful, and lose yourself in the process. Being intelligent means understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. It's allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. It's refusing to be the perpetual savior. It's trusting that others are capable of solving their own problems, and if they aren't, it's not your responsibility to make them capable. Everyone has to do their own inner work. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be engraved in everyone's mind. You always have the option of having no opinion. Why let things you can't control disturb you? This is Stoic wisdom distilled. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need to engage in every drama. You don't need to fix every problem. You can simply observe and choose not to be affected. We've reached the most important moment of this entire journey. Now I'm going to reveal the most powerful truth that Socrates and the Stoics discovered, the one I promised you from the very beginning. A truth so transformative that, if you truly absorb it and live by it, your life will never be the same. Prepare yourself, because this will challenge everything you've been taught about success, happiness, and relationships. Here is the truth. The greatest freedom a human being can achieve is not having everything they want, not being loved by everyone, and not avoiding all suffering. The greatest freedom is needing nothing beyond what already exists within you. It is becoming internally complete, so that everything that comes from the outside is a bonus, not a necessity. It's reaching a point where other people's approval is pleasant, but not essential, where rejection hurts, but doesn't destroy you, where solitude is preferable to relationships that require you to betray yourself. Socrates lived this truth to its ultimate conclusion. When he was imprisoned waiting for his execution, his friends came to visit him completely devastated. They cried, mourned the injustice, and suffered deeply. And what did Socrates do? He comforted them. He was at peace. Because he had reached what the Stoics called autarkeia, inner self-sufficiency. His well-being did not depend on external circumstances, not even on life or death itself. You might think this is impossible to achieve, that it's a beautiful idea, but unrealistic. But let me show you that you've already experienced glimpses of this state. Think of a moment in your life when you were so deeply focused on something meaningful that you completely forgot to check your phone, forgot to see if someone replied, forgot to worry about what others thought of you. In those moments, you were free. You were living from the inside out, not from the outside in. The problem is that these moments are rare because you've been conditioned to constantly seek external validation. You obsessively check if someone responded to your message. You analyze every reaction, trying to decode what people think about you. You constantly adjust your behavior based on feedback. You live like a thermostat, always adjusting to the temperature of the room. But the Stoics invite you to be like the sun, maintaining your own heat, regardless of the environment. Marcus Aurelius faced challenges most of us can't even imagine. He was an emperor during devastating plagues, endless wars, and betrayals from within his own inner circle. He could have become bitter, cynical, or cruel, but instead he chose integrity. He wrote his meditations not for publication, but as daily exercises in inner strength. And what did he constantly remind himself of? That the only things that truly matter are those within his control, his thoughts, his judgments, his intentions. Now let's bring this into your life. You're likely trapped in relationships where you feel you must constantly prove your worth. You're exhausted from trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy, trying to be perfect. And here's the liberating revelation. You never will succeed, not because you're inadequate, but because it's impossible. You cannot control other people's thoughts, feelings, or reactions. Every ounce of energy you spend trying is wasted energy. The Stoics had a practice called the dichotomy of control. Divide everything into two categories: what is under your control and what is not. What is under your control? Your effort, your intentions, how you respond to situations, the values you choose to live by, the actions you take. What is not under your control? The outcomes, other people's opinions, unexpected events, how people react to you, whether success looks the way you imagined. And here is the key: put all your energy into what is under your control and calmly accept what is not. Not with passive resignation, but with wise acceptance. You do your best, act according to your values, and then you let go. The outcome is no longer your burden. You did your part. The rest is beyond your authority. Socrates was unjustly condemned. He did everything he could. He defended himself eloquently, exposed the contradictions of his accusers, and maintained his dignity. But the outcome was not under his control, and he accepted it. He didn't torture himself with, "What if I had said this?" or "What if I had done that?" He did his part and accepted what followed. Now imagine living this way. Imagine giving your best in a relationship, communicating your needs clearly, setting respectful boundaries, acting with genuine love, and then accepting that the other person may choose not to value it. They may choose to leave. They may choose not to reciprocate. And instead of destroying yourself trying to change that, you simply accept it. You did your part. The rest is not your responsibility. This acceptance is not coldness, it is wisdom. It's understanding that every person has their own path, their own choices, their own process of growth. You cannot force anyone to value you. You cannot make anyone love you. You cannot control who stays or who leaves. All you can control is who you are and how you act. Epictetus, who lived much of his life as a slave before becoming free, had a unique perspective. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." Think about the depth of that statement coming from someone who was literally enslaved. He had no control over his physical freedom, but he had complete control over his mental freedom, and he cultivated that inner freedom until it became unshakable. You are physically free, but mentally enslaved, enslaved by fear of rejection, enslaved by the need for approval, enslaved by the compulsion to please. And the irony is that you hold the keys to your own prison. You can free yourself at any moment, but freedom is terrifying because with freedom comes responsibility. You can no longer blame others. You can no longer play the victim. You become the author of your own story. The Stoics spoke of amor fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, but embracing it, even the hardships, the pain, the losses, because all of it is woven into the fabric of life. And more importantly, all of it offers opportunities for growth. Every rejection teaches you who not to value. Every betrayal reveals who doesn't deserve your trust. Every pain strengthens you if you allow it. Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living, but he could have also said that an unlived life is not worth examining. Reflection alone is not enough. Philosophy alone is not enough. You must act. You must apply. You must live these truths. And living them means making difficult choices every single day. It means saying no when everything in you wants to say yes to avoid conflict. It means stepping away from people you love but who are toxic to you. It means choosing temporary loneliness over relationships that demand self-betrayal. It means accepting the disapproval of some in order to keep your self-respect. Each of these choices is painful, but each one frees you a little more. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. They're not your circumstances, not the people around you, not how loved or approved you are, but the quality of your thoughts. If your mind is filled with scarcity, inadequacy, and the need for validation, you will live in constant anxiety. If you cultivate inner sufficiency, self-worth, and integrity, you live in peace." Here is the final practice I want to give you. Every morning when you wake up, before checking your phone, before worrying about what others think, ask yourself 3 questions Socrates would ask: who am I? What do I value? How will I live according to that today? These questions anchor you in your truth. They remind you that you're not here to please, you're here to live authentically. During the day, when you feel the urge to be nice, to give in, to shrink yourself, pause, breathe, and ask, am I doing this out of conscious choice or out of fear? If it's fear, don't do it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it creates tension. Choose integrity over comfort. Every time you do, you strengthen your authenticity muscle. At night, before sleeping, review your day through a Stoic lens. Examine your choices without judgment, only observation. Where did you give in out of fear? Where did you hold your integrity? What did you learn? How can you do better tomorrow? This daily practice of self-examination is what transforms knowledge into wisdom. Socrates spent his life doing exactly this, examining his own life and helping others examine theirs. And when his final moment came, he was ready, because he had lived fully. Not a perfect life, but an authentic one. Not a life without mistakes, but a life without self-betrayal. And in the end, that's the only thing that truly matters. You will die one day. That's not meant to scare you, it's meant to wake you up. When that moment comes, will you regret the times you were nice, or the times you were authentic? Will you regret disappointing others, or betraying yourself? The answer is obvious, so why keep postponing your freedom? The final and most powerful truth I promised you is this: you already have everything you need to be free. You don't need more knowledge, more techniques, or more approval. You only need the courage to be who you are, to stop apologizing for existing, to stop shrinking yourself to fit others' expectations, to stop being nice and start being real. Because in the end, the only person you truly have to face is the one in the mirror, and that person deserves to see someone whole, authentic, and free. The Stoics and Socrates weren't perfect. They struggled with doubt, fear, and hardship like anyone else. But they made one fundamental choice: to live according to truth, no matter the cost. And that choice made them immortal, not because they were special, but because they were brave. You can make that same choice right now. So here's my challenge to you. From this moment on, commit to your integrity. Commit to knowing yourself, living by your values, setting clear boundaries, and choosing real connection over empty approval. It will be hard. It will be uncomfortable. Some people will walk away. But you will find yourself, and there is no greater trade than that. If you've made it to the end of this video, you're ready. You don't need more information. You need action. So do this now. Identify one area of your life where you're being nice out of fear. A relationship, a job, a friendship, a family situation, and take one small action toward integrity. Say the no that's stuck in your throat. Set the boundary you've been avoiding. Have the difficult conversation you keep postponing. And as you do, remember the final words Socrates spoke to his disciples before drinking the hemlock. The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die, and you to live. Which is better? Only God knows. He faced death with peace because he lived with integrity. You don't need to die, but you do need to live, truly live, and that starts now. If this message resonated with you, if you feel it's time to change, subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. I'll keep bringing content that challenges you, transforms you, and frees you. On your screen now are 2 videos I recommend next. One on how the Stoics dealt with toxic people without losing inner peace, and another revealing Socratic techniques to detect lies and manipulation. Both are essential continuations of this journey. Leave a comment sharing how you'll apply this in your life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you're not here to be nice. You're here to be free. And freedom begins the moment you have the courage to be who you truly are. Stop being nice. Start being intelligent. Start being you.